All right, good evening and welcome to From Behind Tall Trees, the live super chat that does not play favorites. It's a show that gives everyone a chance to speak their mind, present their evidence, and tell their story, which in turn allows you, the viewer, an opportunity to make an educated decision as to what you believe. This show looks to stomp out confirmation bias and general Sasquatch stupidity, and who knows, we just might find out what's really going on when it comes to Bigfoot. Here we go. And as you may or may not know, my name is Brendan Brown. I am the founder and director of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. The CARC is a group set up to research and advance the study of various paranormal sciences, most notably, like we're doing here tonight, Bigfoot. With me tonight is the comeback kid, my co-pilot down into tonight's rabbit hole, the John Green of my Renee DeHinden, and back from a COVID-induced vacation, my friend and yours, Mr. Mike Lucci. Good evening, Mike. How are you doing, buddy?
What's going on, guys? Good to be back.
How you been? How you feeling?
Good. I'm pretty much over the worst of it for the most part, so I'm ready to do this.
Well, you were missed. You know, we've got a big show tonight, but before we get started with that, we need to pay some bills. We got a memo from the home office in Bailey, Colorado, and to do this, we here at the show need to talk to all the fans out there and ask you a favor. You see, this show and the entire BXP channel is only really made possible through the support of viewers like you, liking, subscribing, and sharing whatever the hell it is we're trying to do here is vital to the survival of this show and others like it. So that sounds reasonable, right? You know, like, subscribe, and share it. And as we mentioned, this show is a super chat. So if you've got any questions at any time, go ahead and type them in the chat section and use all caps for the questions because it'll be easier to locate and put them. We'll put them on the air as soon as we can. And if you're feeling generous, hit that super chat and that donate to the show, and we'll give you a shout out. You see, because the super chat supports the CARC and helps us finance our investigations and productions like this one you're seeing here tonight. So hit that button, make a donation to help us out and feel good about it. All right, now that that's done, Mike, let's get into this. Monitoring tonight's chat with us, you know, is everybody's best friend and by far the nicest guy in the CARC. Joining us from an undisclosed location somewhere within the Garden State is Jonathan Charles Big Chuck Larson. Come in, Big Chuck.
Yo, Brendan, Mike, what's going on, guys?
There
Mike,
he is.
Great, Mike, great to have you back, man. Good
Thanks,
to see you again.
You guys ready for the show number 4? You know?
Psyched.
So you know what time it is?
Absolutely.
It's time to raise them up. Raise them up, and let's have a toast to a good show.
Cheers.
I'm leaking all over the place here. All right, Chuck, we'll check in with you in a little bit.
You got it. Thanks.
All right, so you know what? This guest, Mike, is if I was to read off all of his accomplishments, we'd run out of time before we even get a chance to talk to the guy. You know, he's a world-renowned cryptozoologist. He's an accomplished author who can be seen frequently on all sorts of television channels. You know, this guy's traveled the world searching for evidence of such creatures, you know, the Loch Ness Monster, El Chupacabra, Mothman, werewolves, and the big guy we're going to discuss here tonight, Sasquatch. In addition to writing 5 books, that's 5, on these unknown animals, his research has been featured on a whole slew of network TV channels, you know, the History Channel, the Travel Channel, Syfy, Nat Geo, just to name a few. You know, his appearances, he's been on Missing in Alaska, Monster Quest, the good one, the classic one, Ancient Aliens, America Unearthed, Legend Hunters, and a lot more. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us from Alamo City, Mr. Ken Gerhard. Ken, you there?
Good evening. Good evening, gentlemen.
What's going on, Ken?
It's good to be with you this evening. I'm honored to be here, and I'm going to enjoy talking to you guys. So this should be fun.
Yeah, you know, I'd really like to take a second to thank you for taking the time out from what must be a really brutal schedule to join us tonight. And we hope that you've been busy, safe, surviving these winter storms and surviving the COVID.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's been a crazy year for everyone, but I managed to get a book out of it, a new one. So I appreciate you mentioning my 5 books. We're up to 6 now. Fortunately, I was able to get that out. Thank you. And of course, the winter was pretty difficult here in San Antonio. You know, it hasn't snowed here since the 80s, and we had a week-long blizzard. So that was definitely brought the whole system down. but we survived it. So remember the Alamo. We're resilient here.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that San Antonio and the Texas Department of Transportation doesn't have a whole lot of salt trucks or plow trucks.
No, they shut the roads down. I mean, moreover, Texans don't know how to drive on ice or snow. They don't have the experience that you guys have. So everybody has a wreck. It's a disaster. So
four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we were saying, first of all, congratulations on your latest book, right? The Essential Guide to Loch Ness Monster and Other Aquatic Cryptids, right?
Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I pre-ordered it from you last week. I think I may have sent the PayPal to a wrong account, but I think we're all lined up on that one. There's the cover.
Oh.
So real quick, let us know the research involved with this. I know you've got a history of traveling as a kid. I read that in your last book. Why don't you tell us the research involved in your process with this latest book?
Yeah. So I did have an amazing childhood, thanks to my mother, who was very adventurous and loved to travel. At age 15, I found myself at Loch Ness back in 1982. And, even at a young age of 15, I attempted my first field research. I had an 8mm movie camera on hand at all times, scouring the lake. And then I also interviewed a lot of the local people to try to get, their take on it, find out if anyone had seen the monster or what their thoughts were. So I guess at a young age, that kind of instilled this desire, this passion in me to kind of pursue these unknown animals. And so I've investigated a lot of different cryptids and mystery creatures, but lake monsters like Nessie have always been dear to my heart. And through the years, I've investigated. I haven't been back to Loch Ness, and actually, COVID kind of spoiled my intent to try to make it back there while I was writing the book. But I have investigated lake monsters in the United States, Canada, and also what are known as sea serpents, which is old school cryptids that a lot of people don't talk about these days, but off the coast of Holland. So much similar to the Essential Guide to Bigfoot. What I tried to do was present the most accurate and objective information on the subject of the Loch Ness Monster and other aquatic cryptids. Try to let people kind of form their own conclusions. I do have one theory that I kind of present in the book, just my opinion. And I also interviewed many of the leading lake monster investigators in the world. So I tried to build a kind of a consensus opinion of what they all, a lot of disagreement, just like with Bigfoot. You have a lot of people that don't agree on a lot of things, but what you try to focus on are the points that people can agree on, especially experienced investigators that have spent years looking at the evidence.
Right.
So Ken, I got a quick question for you, just regarding the Loch Ness Monster in particular.
Yeah, Mike.
I know within the last 1 or 2 years or so, a bunch of researchers, they did this study where they extracted, they took a water sample and they got all this DNA from all these different creatures. They found a couple of things like big fish, eels. They didn't really find anything that they'd say points towards there being a prehistoric creature. So nothing undiscovered lurking there. Having said that, I know a couple of weeks ago, these researchers also got this weird ass sonar reading, I think 300 to 600 feet below the surface of Loch Ness, that it had this large shape on the sonar. They said it was either like a large creature about 30 something odd feet long, or potentially a school of fish. So just with those two pieces, with those two tidbits in mind, what are your reactions to that? Just in terms of how it affects just the argument of whether or not there's something actually lurking in that lake.
Yeah, it's a paradox, much like Bigfoot and other cryptids, where you have two juxtaposed, very strong arguments for and against. The eDNA study you mentioned was run by a university in New Zealand by a guy named Neil Gemmell, and they took actually 250 water samples all over the loch at different depths. They extracted the biological material, and they were able to mark or describe 3,000 species. Wow. Many fish and planktons and things, mammals, everything. But you're right. They didn't find anything completely unexpected, except about 25% of the DNA was unidentifiable. And that's apparently standard in these types of studies, which is kind of a burgeoning field. So that gives the cryptozoologist some wiggle room there. a quarter of the stuff you couldn't identify. And also, and there's been a prevalent theory regarding Loch Ness that whatever these animals are, they're able to move in and out of the loch to the ocean. It would be a very difficult trip because the connecting rivers and canals are shallow, and there are locks with ships that are monitored and stuff. But who knows? Similar types of creatures to Nessie have been sighted in the oceans for centuries, and also in lakes around the world that are also connected to the ocean, typically. So,
well, one of the theories with I'm sorry to cut you off. One of the theories with Loch Ness is they think there's caves or underground passageways that connect to the ocean. Because I think there's like this ridge that runs along it, and literally that overlooks Loch Ness. Literally on the other side of that ridge is the ocean. I think. Is that accurate or?
That speculation has been around for a long time, but there's two reasons why that's impossible. One is that Loch Ness lies 52 feet above sea level. So if it were connected to the sea, it would be at sea level. Mm-hmm. And the other is that the water, which has been tested vigorously, is not brackish. There's no trace of salt or saline. So if it were connected to the ocean, you would have, the lower elevation, and also the water quality would be different. So
okay, interesting.
Yeah, I figured that with the brackish part, it would be kind of a telltale sign that if you've got some of the salt water in there, then there would have to be some sort of egress to the ocean. With the book, Ken, now the Essential Guide, is it written a lot in the same style that you did with the Bigfoot guide? Because I tell you, the Bigfoot book which I just finished, was really clean. It was really well done, and you had some great quotes in there. I think it was the one part with you had in the introduction. It says, if I can paraphrase here, Ken, if you don't mind, with the regard to the subject of Bigfoot and other enigmatic creatures, misinformation, misconceptions, and all-out falsehoods rule the day. It's becoming more and more difficult to determine what claims, if any, have merit, and the findings are being forgotten. I mean, that is the truth to a T, my friend, in that book. And so the Essential Guide to Loch Ness is kind of the same style that you did with the Bigfoot book?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Mike kind of not to slag on Mike, but he kind of illustrated it nicely there. So there was this theory, there were underground caverns. It's been published in different books through the years. So a lot of people still assume that that's a valid theory, but it's a misunderstanding because it's been disproved by the science. But, just like with Bigfoot, there are just a lot of those kind of misconceptions that people have because they heard something on a TV show or read something in a book, but maybe they didn't, follow through and see. Not that that's Mike's job on Nessie, Mike. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You got that one piece of information, but you missed out on the other piece of information that was relevant. So that happens a lot in these fields. So yes, I did try to write in that same type of style.
I really enjoyed it, and I think you had the foreword by Peter Byrne, and so Peter must have told you, because I mean, if anybody's had a colorful, storyful life within the Sasquatch research community, I think he like steal and smuggle the hand out of Nepal, and then he handed it over to Jimmy Stewart in India, and then Tom Slick was involved. I mean, talk about characters. That's about as colorful as you get there. And now is Peter still with us, right?
Yeah, he's just turned 94, I think. He emailed me a picture on his 94th birthday, and I answered back, looking good. He does. He looks pretty good for a 94-year-old.
But I mean, that's when, like you said, the stories and the research that was being done, not only with him but with Tom Slick and all the guys, DeHinden and the early cast of characters.
Yeah,
a lot of that is being lost, like you said, and it's time to kind of clear up things and set things straight. That seems like what you're doing.
Let me tell you one quick anecdote about Peter, because of all the original Four Horsemen, and everyone knows Renee, his temperament, and John Green is his scholarly approach, and Grover Krantz is my hero. I love the science. Peter, a lot of those guys didn't respect Peter, but he's always been a gentleman. He's spent decades searching for the Yeti and Bigfoot. And let me tell you how hardcore Peter is. Back in 1956-57, when Tom Slick started to fund the Yeti expedition and hired Peter and his brother Brian to run the expedition, Peter and his brother were living in a cave 17,000 feet up in the Himalayas in a cave for 3 years searching for the Yeti. That's hardcore. I mean, you want to, come on. I respect Renee DeHinden, but come on, Renee. Are you going to live in a friggin' cave up in the mountains for 3 years to search for? I mean, he probably would. And Renee was passionate, but you know what I'm saying? I mean, these guys were tough. They were tough hombres. And Peter's so funny, though, because he's also such a, he's a tough guy, but he's such a gentleman, with the ascot and the hat. And I asked him when I met him, I said, I'm affiliated with the San Antonio Zoo. What do you remember about the San Antonio Zoo, working with them in the 50s? And he said, I collected a Himalayan black bear and some snow leopards and gave them to the zoo. So it was just very gentlemanly, but that was there's a cool story. Wow, man, you caught some snow leopards and black bears. But anyways, yeah, he's a great guy, and he always stayed above the fray. There's a lot of fighting, back in that day. And even in his foreword to my book, I mean, doesn't he pay respect to all the guys that were slagging on him, John Green and Renee?
Exactly.
He gave them there. So he's a class act, in my opinion.
He did. He took the high road in the introduction. It was very well written. And, I had to go back and kind of go through some of the stuff that the accomplishments that he did, and your imagination goes wild. And that's what it's really kind of a little frustrating nowadays is you have, if these guys were unable to really push the ball across the goal line and provide, undoubtable proof, it's hard. I find it difficult to find a group of characters like that are gonna be able to take the ball and move it forward with all the infighting and the clutteredness that's going on right now. I mean, you're already hearing tales from the BFRO how they're changing the narrative on some of their reports. We had Carter Bouchard on, so if you don't have class act like Peter, being able to finish it, I'm holding out for. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Let's put it that way, because I don't see the research. The research really hasn't been moved forward since I think the Patterson Gimlin film. What do you think in your mind, besides the PG film, has anything? I know you just did the heart hair sample report, and that's how I first got speaking with you. I think, is it called the heart hair sample report?
Dr. Haskell Hart, who's a friend of mine, brilliant guy, PhD chemist from Harvard. He decided to get into hair analysis because he's got a really great microscope and he's got a terrific analytical mind. So people had sent me several hair samples through the years that were alleged to be Bigfoot. And admittedly, I don't have a microscope for a lot of time, so they kind of sat in my drawer for years. But I finally gathered them up and sent them to Haskell and said, can you take a look at these? And, obviously all hairs, and this is a message to Bigfoot researchers out there, because everyone always talks about a hair, let's get DNA done. And it's like, dude, that's $1,500, Before you do that, put it under a microscope, and every mammal, every order of mammals has different characteristics in its hair that you can learn about. The medulla, the scalation patterns, and, different qualities and characteristics, the banding, the tapering. So you look at that and you can immediately see, oh, that's a cow. So I mean, if you know what a cow hair looks like, and so most of those hair samples were ungulates, cows, horses. There was one hair that Haskell said was interesting, and he's going to take a longer look at. He said it looked like a primate, which was encouraging, or a human possibly, but he wasn't like gung ho. He was just like, let me take a longer look at this one hair, and maybe it's a human hair. You can't rule that out either, though the human hairs can be found in the woods too sometimes. So
right. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, so for Bigfoot researchers out there, that I encourage people to become citizen scientists and think about ways that they can analyze the evidence, without immediately jumping to the conclusion it's got to be Bigfoot, or thinking that you've got to have this grand DNA test done on a hair, because there's a process of vetting that goes on with evidence, and you have to put it through those. And peer review is important too. Don't be afraid, if you find evidence, don't be afraid to let some of your peers look at it and give you an objective opinion. And respect that opinion. So that kind of goes back to what you were just talking about. Now, it's true, we have been going in circles for a long time. And Dr. Jeff Meldrum told me that recently. He thinks the Bigfoot field's kind of been going in this loop, hasn't really moved a lot forward. But, I'm hopeful because of the technologies like eDNA, which we just talked about, and FLIR and drones and all these great new gadgets that we've got. And I'm also hopeful because despite all the current fighting in the Bigfoot field, which I know it seems like there's a lot, there really is, I've learned from traveling around the country and working with different researchers and going to conferences, there really is at the heart of it a core of very serious investigators that really do like and respect each other and share their research and stuff. So that, not everybody's in that club, but I think there's enough of those people that it's encouraging. And the last thing I want to, sorry, I'm rambling, but the last thing
they hear us talk all the freaking time, so have at it.
I'm also encouraged by the next generation coming up because I get emails from high school and college students that want to get into cryptozoology or people that want to get active in and so I think there's a lot of young people, thanks to Finding Bigfoot and shows like that are becoming interested in the subject again. And so this may be a mystery that's not solved in our lifetime. Maybe it will be, hopefully. But unfortunately, if it's not, we'll pass the baton on to the next generation. Hope they can get the job done.
I just want to ask you a quick follow-up question on that, Ken. Because I'm a millennial. I'm really into this stuff. I really think, like, especially with my generation, Gen Z, there definitely is a audience that's really into this stuff, paranormal, cryptozoology. Yeah. Especially now in the age of social media. People my generation, Generation Z, their top priority is fitting in, being accepted by everyone. I really think one of the reasons why people in my generation younger aren't as outspoken about their interests in things like this is because they're afraid of the ridicule they might get, like being dubbed as an outcast. If you could say something to people that have those type of reservations, encourage them to get into the field to try to get over that, what would it be?
Well, it's a good question. As I mentioned in the book, The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, based on recent surveys, only about 18 to 22% of the general population thinks Bigfoot could possibly exist. So all of us here, we're in the minority. We're like 1 in 5. So it's understandable why a lot of people are worried about being looked at as being a little eccentric, a little crazy, laughed at. I've had people laugh in my face. I mean, of course, it's gonna happen. But frankly, you can't really. Like personally, I don't really care what people think about me. I know that's kind of a saying.
We covered that yesterday when I was defending you.
I've kind of always felt that. Yeah, I don't. People have
just
opinions.
Trolls.
You got to have a thick skin in this field, and not worry about what people are going to think about you. Worry about how you feel about yourself, your integrity as you approach the subject, and keeping it real. And I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things. People that get into it, they seem to become pretty passionate about it, and generally they can kind of ward off a lot of that criticism and stuff because it's well, you guys know, this is, once you get into it, it's something that kind of just takes over. It
literally the 600-pound gorilla.
You become immersed into it.
Yeah. So, but anyways, I think that, talking about the other thing about the cultural thing, and you guys might want to get into this more, but as far as like the paranormal Bigfoot, this is a cyclical thing. And it's, culture tends to kind of go in cycles and things kind of come and go. So the paranormal Bigfoot thing was big in the 70s, right? I mean, after the Patterson-Gimlin film, you had a lot of these people were trying to connect Bigfoot to, mind speak and UFOs. And, you'd see TV shows where they would try to connect, Bigfoot, Atlantis, the Bermuda Triangle, it kind of was in that paradigm. And then that kind of went away for a while, and now it's just kind of resurfaced because we're in what I consider to be kind of a new spiritualist age where ghost hunting is real popular and, all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I'm not an advocate of that, and I think it's harmful to the field because people that aren't into Bigfoot, if they hear that stuff, then they tend to kind of lump us all together, right? And say, oh, those Bigfoot people, they all think he's from a UFO and interdimensional or whatever. But
Yeah, I mean that was we started. I started the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective last year, and we were originally started it. It was going to be like kind of like we're going to look at paranormal. We're going to look at paranormal sciences. We're going to look at this, and then we started to do the Bigfoot thing, and literally, it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room because it takes over. It's got a mind of its own, and so here we are now with the paranormal or with the Sasquatch super chat. After we swore we wouldn't do a podcast, and then so the attraction of people to Bigfoot, Ken, in 20 words or less, what do you think, or what's the attraction to Bigfoot that hooks people in? I mean, here we are. We started this group, and now we're. It seems like it's Bigfoot. Do you think there's a primal correlation to our history as a humanity, or something simpler?
Yeah, well, it's an easy answer. It's going to touch a nerve in a lot of people, but Bigfoot is us. When we see Bigfoot, we see our wilder self, our kind of where we came from when we had a time when we were more in harmony with nature, because people describe Bigfoot as looking so human-like, or at least closer to a human than any other animal, right?
Right.
So you can get into all kinds of psychology. Jungian psychology talks about the shadow, which is kind of in all of us. We have kind of that animal instinct, where we don't, really care about anything except ourselves and survival. We can act without inhibition. And so I think that's one of the reasons that Bigfoot is so popular, is because people feel like, connecting with Bigfoot is like connecting with ourself in a way, or connecting with the kind of where we came from, as you kind of suggest, where it all started. So that's my main theory. I think it just because it's so human-like, that's what makes it the rock star of cryptozoology. That's
an understatement. You spent a lot of time in your book actually talking about Littlefoot and a whole lot of the history of oral traditions and stuff. For those of them who aren't familiar with the Littlefoot story, and I know Mike has got a lot of questions in this thing. Why don't you bring us up to speed on that whole Littlefoot section, or theory, I should say.
Yeah, and if as I've investigated Bigfoot around North America, from Alaska and even down into Central America, one thing that I've come across frequently, and usually when I'm talking to native or indigenous peoples, is you'll start asking about Bigfoot, and then they always bring up the little people. But the little people are supposedly like Bigfoot, but just covered in hair, but they're just very small, 3 to 5 feet tall, but they're not Bigfoot. They're something different. And many of these native peoples are much more terrified of these Littlefoot creatures than they are of Bigfoot. They talk about Bigfoot. Yes, Bigfoot is the big hairy wild man that lives deep in the woods, the savages or whatever, but these Littlefoot creatures, and of course the most famous around the world would be like the orang pendek from Sumatra, the short man. And you can find different Littlefoot traditions in all over the world, just like with Bigfoot and the Yeti. You find in Africa, you find the Agagwe and the Tokolosh. In South America, it's the Didi and the Shiru. In Australia, they're the Jundiji. In Asia, you have the the Yetis. Sometimes are described as being little people. And then here in North America, in Alaska, we studied when I did an episode of Missing Alaska, we studied the little people up there known as the Anukins, or the Urchin Rock, or the Jinxiacs. There are also many Native American names: Awakule, Nurumbi, Hachesitehi, Mamagwesi. And then down in Central America, in Mexico, I got reports of something called the Duende, the goblin. So the descriptions are all very similar. So again, 3 to 5 feet tall, walks upright like a man, covered in hair, usually a reddish color, very powerfully built despite being short, broad shoulders and stuff, but not a Bigfoot. Very ancient human-like faces, pot bellies, and they're also said to have long fangs and claws. And they're very malevolent towards humans. Lots of stories of them abducting children or killing livestock and pets, getting in the woodwork, so to speak. So I wanted to draw attention to that aspect, that there could be potentially more than one species of unknown hominid, as remarkable as that might seem, that there could even be one species of unknown hominid in Bigfoot. Could there be two? A second type that's very small. And the second type, the small type, actually fits better into the paradigm of the fossil history. Because if you look back at most of the pre-human ancestors starting a few million years ago in Africa, the Australopithecines and Homo habilis and all those, they were all short. They were all about 3 to 5 feet tall. So they look just like a Littlefoot, you know. We have less candidates for Bigfoot, Gigantopithecus and, you know, Paranthropus and stuff. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of draw attention to that aspect, that maybe these Littlefoot traditions could represent a second pygmy-sized species, maybe something completely different.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, how many times have you gone out searching for the quote unquote little people over your travels?
Well, I mounted 2 expeditions to the nation of Belize in Central America because there were a lot of reports from the Maya Mountains there. So 2 times down there. 1 time in Mexico, I was actually on a Chupacabra expedition, but somebody mentioned a duende and it sidetracked me. Alaska. Honestly, I haven't done too many field investigations. I've had a list of places that I've wanted to go check these out. Northern Minnesota, there have been accounts of the Memagwesi. In the Pryor Mountains of Montana, there are accounts of the little people there. And even here in the southeast, Ivan Sanderson wrote about the little red men of the Delta, which were these little red-colored, hair-covered creatures in the Mississippi deltas. And even close to where I live, well, not too close, but about 4 hours from where I live in Texas, in Dayton, Texas, something known as the Monkey Man, which was reported within this century. So there are a few of those on my bucket list, but I've only done a few actual investigations or expeditions for Littlefoot.
Yeah, I had wondered if there was a like you said, two unknown creatures, and my theory was that maybe Sasquatch controlled the north part of the continent, and then when you get into the hotter climates, you look at the swamp ape and something like that, where the smaller creature is probably makes more sense with nature to exist in the hotter, smaller, swampier climates. Is that something similar to what you're talking about, Ken?
Well, that's good zoology there, Brandon, because you have something called Bergman's rule, where species tend to get larger in colder climates and shrink down. Mountain lions being one example. But so yeah, it's true that most of the accounts of Littlefoot, or at least as far as I knew for a long time, most of the accounts of Littlefoot were in hot equatorial regions, Central America, the Congo in Africa, or Central Africa, Asia and stuff. But I think that's recently been challenged by my investigation in Alaska, where I found there were so many prevalent Littlefoot stories up there too. So, but you're right. If you were to look at it from a zoological point of view, it would make far more sense that you'd have the big giant ones up in the mountains, up in the north in the cold, and the smaller compact ones in those hotter climates and subtropical habitats.
Yeah.
So based on just like the time you've spent investigating the little people, and just based on conversations you have with people who've been out in the field investigating them as well, how would you say the approach is when investigating, researching these smaller hominid, these smaller bipeds are different from the conventional Bigfoot Sasquatch type?
Well, you have to look lower. That was a joke.
Figuratively and literally.
Sorry, you are great. No, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. You set the trail cameras a little lower and stuff, but the accounts are much more prevalent again with Native American or Native people. I have one recent Littlefoot account from Ohio that I write about in the book. A guy named Jake Dressel, who he and his wife saw this thing on separate occasions.
Walking the dog, right? That was the one at the
yeah. And then you have something called the Albat Witch in New York. That you guys probably heard of the Albat Witch. It's been reported up there near Chickies Rock and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. Yeah, Pennsylvania is what I meant to say.
Mm-hmm.
But there really aren't a lot of I don't get a lot of those types of reports. Most of them do come from the native people. Now like I said, I spoke to a group of native people in the Dakotas that were said that these things were running rampant on their reservation. These Littlefoot creatures were stealing their food and killing their dogs, and that was kind of a shock to me because I don't get a lot of those types of, Littlefoot stories. Usually they're peeking out of the brush or something, but as far as like being very interactive. So I don't know. I think there'd be a similar methodology. I mean, you're presumably looking for something that's in the Homo line, so it's very intelligent. They're probably very social because, all primates tend to have social interactions. I would look in a lot of caves, and, that's one of the prevalent stories regarding the Littlefoot creatures, that they always live in caves or holes in the ground or little places like that. So I guess that's where I'd start.
Now you've with the books, the 5 books that you've written, and the list when I read it off in the first part is the Loch Ness Monster, El Chupacabra, Mothman, werewolves. I mean, you're all over the freaking place here. I think the only TV channels I haven't seen you on are probably the Food Network and Oprah's channel there, Ken. So what, there's got to be something that what is the most bizarre? We can get away from the Bigfoot thing here for a second. I think we've covered enough Bigfoot to cover our sponsors. Not that we have any, but what's the weirdest, the strangest or most crazy, unusual report? Either the report that you've had an opportunity to investigate, or something that was completely batshit crazy that you were thrown into and you had to deal with, whether it be a TV show or your personal investigations.
Okay, so we're not talking about people just messaging me with something. I have to actually get involved in it. Okay.
Well, you can tell us both. You can tell us some effed up story, and you can tell us the one that you actually had to go out in the field and do.
Well, I get a lot of effed up stories constantly. There's a guy in France that keeps messaging me in French, which I told him, look, you have to at least translate it to English before you, because his threads are so incredibly long. It's like I'm not going to translate this whole thing from French. But the most recent thing he told me is that he's tracking a giant invisible tarantula, and that he sent me pictures of its droppings, allegedly, which was just a big weird ball thing. He's pretty cosmic. A lot of the habituation stories get pretty wild. I got a lot of weird sightings. Last year I had a lady that saw a black panther with wings. People always talk about seeing black panthers, these big black cats and wings. It was combined. So a lot of those kinds of, and I'm always respectful. I don't disregard people or question their integrity or credibility, but it's just pretty far out. As far as what I've been involved in, obviously for the TV shows, I mean, for like Missing in Alaska, we knew it was going to be mostly cryptozoology, but they wanted to do, at least one UFO episode. And there was this a ghost episode. And then there was also this HARP facility, which was a military installation where they've got these, radars, and they're beaming things into the ionosphere. And so it's kind of a conspiracy type episode. So some of those were pretty wild. And actually my most embarrassing moment on television.
Oh, here we go. Perfect. Everybody start recording now. They convinced us, and believe me, it was a pretty brutal. I was fighting with the producers a lot. This was a pretty brutal fight. But one of the producers, who's a complete sweetheart, so maybe that's why she won in the end, wanted us to put on tinfoil hats when we're flying around in this helicopter over HARP. And I mean, we fought it. Finally, she's like, look, we probably won't even use it, please, blah, blah, blah. And so we just, for fun, we put the tinfoil hats on, and we asked the cameraman, who was a colorful guy, and he was one of the first cameramen on the show Cops years ago. So he's been doing reality TV for decades. Jesus, yeah. And they asked him, well, what do you think? Sandman, that was his name, Sandman. He said, this is the stupidest thing that I've ever filmed in my 40 years as a cameraman. Do you have any publicity stills from that?
I hope not. But anyone can go back and watch the HARP episode and see fortunately I wear this hat, so I could just kind of slip the tinfoil underneath and I'll have a liner. Yeah. I don't know. There are some, there's always kind of a give and take in television. And I know that a lot of people would think that it would affect your credibility and integrity, and it can. But I always try to hold the line. I always try to stand up for what I think is right. But the bottom line with any television show, and keep in mind that a TV show is usually being paid for somebody at a network that's investing, millions of dollars. So
Right.
it's their call. It's their millions. It's their call if you want to be on the show. And it's entertainment. So
there you go.
Information, and you want to present as much good information and thought-provoking information, but ultimately no one's going to watch a show, or at least this is the way it's been explained to me, because I've been trying to do a show about information for years, and people just don't want just information. It's got to be kind of entertaining too. So you balance those things out. Now again, not to drop a name, but Jeff Meldrum, he's gotten some criticism because he's appeared on some he's laid some eggs on some, not he hasn't, but some of the shows he's been on, and he doesn't even watch the shows. He doesn't really watch television, but he'll do the shows. And someone once asked him, why do you go on all these stupid TV shows? And he said, well, if I don't do it, then they're going to put someone on that doesn't have as good information as I have. And I want to at least put the best information out there that I can while I can, instead of letting somebody less informed or less responsible about how they're presenting the information. So, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. You're advocating for the best info, period. And sometimes you have to, dance with the devil to do that.
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there, and I noticed that I've been, as after I put your thumb out, and you're by far the show's early on, but by far the largest name we've had out there, and you've got name recognition, and there's a lot of people out there that I think they've got a misnomer that just because you're on the TV show that you're this rich guy selling snake oil and dancing with the devil, like you said. I don't think that's an accurate assumption of life as a cryptozoologist that comes on the Discovery Channel, the Discovery Network of channels. I think that's a little bit far from the mark. Am I correct, Ken?
Yes, you're spot on. The thing people probably don't understand about reality TV is it doesn't really pay well if you're just doing, an occasional appearance here and there. And even one season of a reality TV show, typically there's a standard fee you get for a first season, which isn't that impressive. But if you hit it and you go into multiple seasons and picked up, then you have a chance to negotiate, and you still don't get rich, but at least then you've got a little bit more leverage to get a little more of a decent wage for that type of thing. So as a cryptozoologist, it's a struggle financially. I do a little TV. When it comes, I write books and do a lot of royalties, and I do lectures and appearances around the country. And between all those things, I managed to earn a living, but I'm certainly not living high on the hog by any stretch. And I don't, that's not important to me. What's important to me is I love what I do and I'm passionate about it. So
this is a super chat, and we got our first super chat question.
Cool.
So we got to jump that right to the front of the line, and it's about the Loch Ness Monster. And we've got Mark wants to know. I'm just going to read it here. It says, "What's the possibility of the Loch Ness Monster is actually a kelpie?" I don't know what a kelpie is. Ken, do you know what that is?
Yes, kelpie in Gaelic and Scottish lore, the kelpie is a shape-shifting water monster that typically looks like a half horse and a fish's tail, kind of a combination. And it's said to lure people into the depths, and it'll drown people. It's kind of a trickster that lures people into the water, and then it drowns you.
Okay.
I absolutely, removing kind of the whimsical aspect of what we just talked about, I absolutely, and write about this in the book, absolutely think there's a connection between the Loch Ness Monster and other Scottish water monsters and the Kelpie legends. It proves that there is a long history in antiquity of the Scottish and Gaelic people talking about water beasts that lived in these lakes. And they may have had a horse-like head. I'm not saying they were horses, but this is kind of discussed in my book. But the features of the head may look very horse-like, which may have inspired part of the Kelpie legend. So yes, that was a good question. I think there is a connection between the two. But I don't think the Loch Ness Monster is a shape-shifting spirit that's trying to drown people.
Right.
I would remove that that part of it.
We've got another question here from Scarborough Sasquatch Station. This is a little bit different. It says, wants to know, have you ever heard of 12 to 18-inch long flying snakes with wings?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, the ancient Greek philosopher Herodotus first wrote about flying snakes and winged snakes and his travels through the Middle East, and I think Egypt and some of those places. What I've investigated, and I've interviewed many people, eyewitnesses who claim that they've seen flying reptiles with a long snake-like tail with a flange or a diamond fin shape on the end. And in fact, those particular flying reptiles that they're describing with the leathery wings and stuff are surviving, if they exist, are surviving rhamphorhynchoids, which are pterosaurs.
Okay.
You know, they're smaller. People know about pterodactyls. Those are the big ones, but there are smaller flying reptiles that were around for, 100 million years. They were contemporary with the dinosaurs, and they may have looked very much like a flying snake because they had this long snake-like tail trailing behind. And most of them were very small. They were only about the size of a crow or a pigeon. Some were a little bigger. So, I mean, if these flying snake stories are true, then as unlikely as it seems, then maybe, a surviving rhamphorhynchoid or pterosaur would fit that description.
Now, Mike, we were talking earlier today on the phone about some flying creatures that you wanted to talk to Ken about. Mike,
sorry about that.
Just turned back on.
Yeah, Ken. I know one of the cryptids you're particularly big on is the Thunderbird phenomena.
Yes.
So I kind of have like a two-part question. Like you're talking about pterosaurs and everything like that. Do you think a lot of these sightings, if this is like a legitimate creature, could be an instance of, maybe some modern version of a pterosaur that survived and eluded us, or do you think it could be an instance of like an actual big avian bird creature with like a 15, 20-foot wingspan, or do you think it could be a combination of both? What do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I have a giant map on my wall, which you probably wouldn't even be able to see if I turn the computer, but I've marked all of the sightings of living pterosaurs that I've collected, people I've interviewed, and also other investigators have interviewed. And I've also marked, those are red pins, and then with black pins I've marked all the sightings of what you're describing, the traditional Native American thunderbirds, which are described as feathered birds. All birds have feathers. Mm-hmm. Usually black or charcoal or brown color, solid color, hooked beak like a raptor or an accipiterid. And I have about an equal number of both types of sightings. And on the map, those areas overlap. So you have clusters of both types of thunderbirds in one spot. I don't know what that means. Is it a problem of interpretation? In other words, are people seeing either a giant bird and they're just saying it's prehistoric, and in their mind they're filling in the blanks and saying, well, maybe it was a pterodactyl, not a bird? Or is it the opposite? Is it, we know now that pterosaurs had proto feathers, pycnofibers, which were like feather-like coverings on part of their body, so they probably looked more bird-like than Jurassic Park. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But I don't know. But yeah, I have an equal number of both types of sightings. I've interviewed many credible witnesses that swear they've seen either one or the other. It's, the skeptic in me is saying it's improbable enough that one type of giant prehistoric winged creature has survived without being found. Yeah. And now you're going to postulate two completely different types, a bird and a reptile. So it's a mystery. And that's the thing I love about cryptozoology and all this stuff, guys, is there are mysteries within mysteries. Mm-hmm. And so you never run out of those different layers to kind of peel back and explore and discuss and argue. It's fascinating.
Did you ever see that footage of it was supposedly Thunderbird footage? It was I forget. I think it was somewhere in the Midwest. It was like some dude in a canoe in a river.
Yeah.
And what were your thoughts on that footage? I forget the details. I forget the name of the guy who did it, where it was located, but.
Lake Shelbyville, Illinois.
It was Illinois, okay.
July 29th, 1977. The guy's name was Texas John Huffer, and he was a Native American. He was also a stringer for the local news channel, so he had a camera with him. And he was out on a boat with his son, and on the south side of Lake Shelbyville, they saw these two giant birds perched in a tree, and he blew the horn on the boat to make them take off, and he filmed them flying off. I think they're bigger than, I think they're they're as big as condors, in my opinion, which have a 9 or 10 foot wingspan. You know, a lot of skeptics and scientists have tried to explain them as being just turkey vultures. And I see turkey vultures on a daily basis here in Texas. I don't know about you guys, but, you know, you get used to the turkey vulture wingspan tops out about 5, maybe 6 feet. And to my eye, that footage is the most convincing Thunderbird footage I've seen.
Oh, wow.
But like the PGF, you know, footage and, you know, everything else, it's controversial because you can't say conclusively. Now, on the episode of Monster Quest that I appeared on, the first season was called Birdzilla, where they talked about Thunderbirds back in 2007. They had 3 traditional scientists, bird experts, and they were split. They were divided. 2 of the guys said they're turkey vultures, and the third guy said, that's not a turkey vulture. I don't know what that is. It's too big. So there you go.
That was that was. I just want to make a comment about Monster Quest. Is that when that show first came out back then? That's when Monster Quest was a great show. I'm not sure what the recycled version is now that they have out, but the original Monster Quest was really a fun, informative show that you were on. That whole season was amazing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I thought it was a well done show.
Yeah.
You know, they brought in a lot of different perspectives. They'd always have a cryptozoologist or someone like myself, and then they always had some skeptics, guys like Ben Radford or you know, whoever, to kind of give the opposing arguments. And they had real scientists that would come in and weigh in, and they looked at evidence, and it was very well done across the board. I think it's a shame they didn't keep it going more than 3 seasons, or maybe 3 or 4 seasons. I don't remember.
Yeah, now it seems like they're just taking recycled clips of old shows, piecing them together for a cash grab, and again, it's kind of fallen by the wayside. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mike. There, go ahead.
No, that's cool. I believe wasn't Illinois too where that story happened? Like some 10-year-old kid supposedly got picked up by a bird for like 10 seconds or something like that. Do you know much about that story? What do you know about that story?
That was a week before the footage was shot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And July 22nd, 1977, 8 o'clock in the evening. 9-year-old Marlon Lowe was playing with his 2 friends. And these 2 birds came down and grabbed Marlon supposedly by the shirt and dragged him about 35 feet, only about 2 feet off the ground. So not real high, but about 35 feet in front of several witnesses, including his parents and 2 other adults. 7 witnesses saw this. And he finally managed to fight his way free, and this bird dropped him. Wow. And the 2 birds flew off. And then that's when that kind of hysteria sprung up in Illinois about these big birds. And of course, once again, the turkey vulture was suggested as, turkey vultures don't have grasping talons. You know, they're scavengers. They have turkey feet. They have very weak feet. They stand on the ground and they eat carrion. They don't grab and carry things. So, that pretty much eliminates a turkey vulture right there, in my opinion. And also a condor, probably, because I don't think condors are, similar. They don't really have grasping talons. There are accounts in history of large eagles, brown eagles, and other golden eagles picking up small children and things and carrying them. So, but they didn't describe them as looking like eagles. So I don't know. But it's a great Thunderbird story. It's the most iconic Thunderbird story, as you suggest.
Yeah, I forget what show it was. It was from a long ass time ago when I saw this, but they found this baby skull going back like thousands of years old, and they found
millions.
Millions. Okay, you probably already know what I'm talking about. And they found markings on the skull, and they deduced that it was from talons from a giant bird.
Yeah, it was the Tong child, which was an Australopithecine.
Okay.
And you're right. I'm not trying to be Mr. Correct.
No.
But it was probably about at least 2 million years old, because that's when the Australopithecus was 1.5 million. But they could tell that this fossil skull had been, you're right, the skull had been caved in by talons. So there were large eagles preying on the people at that time, the pre-people.
don't get me wrong, like I try to be as objective as possible in this field, and things like Thunderbirds. It's like I want to believe in things like this so badly. So correct me, and like by all means, correct me if I'm wrong at any point. The one thing that the one thing that really makes me hesitant about committing to a phenomenon like Thunderbirds is the lack of physical evidence that there seems to be. Like I know in the fossil records we have, there's like species that discovered of birds that have 15, 20 feet wingspans. But like, for example, if these things are still out there flying in the skies, like the car in my driveway, I park under the tree. Birds leave me presents on my car at least like once, twice a week. I know I might sound like a little hypocritical, given how I tend to be a Bigfoot apologist every now and then. But what's in that regard, how come we're not seeing people's cars get dive bombed by Thunderbird droppings every now and then?
No, you nailed it, man. You got it, Mike. I mean, I've argued that exact same thing. There's no physical evidence for Thunderbirds, which is a problem. No one's found a giant eggshell or a nest or yeah. You said the bird crap. No, none of that. So it's definitely a strong argument against it. I don't have a strong argument for you other than I've interviewed dozens and dozens of credible people that swear they've seen them, and these are people oftentimes that that work with animals or live on ranches, or they're, experienced wildlife observers. So that's really the only evidence we have are these stories and the Native American legends and traditions, which are prevalent, and that one film. But you're right. The evidence is much weaker than, say, for Bigfoot, no doubt.
Which doesn't mean it isn't out there. It's just, it makes the argument for more difficult at this time.
I encourage that. I always want people to think skeptically, critical thinking. I'm not opposed to that at all. I think it's a good thing.
Hey, Ken, we're getting close to the hour here. I had a super chat question. I'm going to read it straight up from Ryan Fusco. Hey, Ken, can you tell us a story about, I believe it was in Montana, maybe in the 50s, a man or woman saw a winged mechanical man flying? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, it was actually in Washington State, and it was in the late 1940s. I read about this in my book, Encounters with Flying Humanoids. But yeah, there were sightings right after the first quote-unquote flying saucers were sighted near Mount Rainier by a pilot named Kenneth Arnold in 1947. There were these reports coming out of Washington State of these flying men that had these silver mechanical wings and control panels on their chest, kind of flying around in the air. And this was before jetpacks or any of that. So it was, a lot of that was connected to UFOs. But if you check out my book, Encounters with Flying Humanoids, I go into more depth about those sightings.
Now, wasn't Kenneth Arnold the one that coined the phrase flying saucers? Is that the same pilot that saw him skipping around? He
said that they look like saucers skipping across the water, or discs skipping across the water. And yeah, he kind of created that phrase, or the newspapers took his description and kind of molded the name flying saucer. That's true.
Well, we have covered an enormous amount of territory here today with the Bigfoot, and right there into the flying humanoids. I'm hoping that maybe, Ken, you'll come back with us some other time. We ran short on time just because there's so much stuff to cover. I really want to thank you for coming on the show tonight, and I hope you decide to come back and visit us sometime.
We're probably until midnight.
All right on. Well, guys, I'd love to come back on. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. And there's always much more to discuss and talk about. But thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and if people want to get in touch with you, is there a contact or an email or a Facebook page, or do you want to just tell them real quick how they get in touch with Ken Gerhard?
Yeah, that's okay. I've got a website, kengerhard.com, but I don't know if that message link always works. So I would say the best way to contact me is on my Facebook fan page, Ken Gerhard Cryptozoologist, or my email address is listed on that page. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter. And I have a YouTube channel too, and people can post comments on there as well. So I can be tracked down, unlike the elusive Littlefoot.
Yes, and if you go to the YouTube channel, you'll get to see a dope ass video that Ken put together with his band. The Providence video. It's pretty sweet. There's a whole another side of Ken Gerhard that nobody knows with the music videos and the music production and all that stuff. We'll have to hit on that later. I'll let you check out Ken. Mike and I are going to do some housekeeping here on the ass end. But thanks again for joining us on the show, man. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And here's wishing thanks to everyone who listened in. Stay safe and be well. And we'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks, bud. Take care.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye-bye.
So, I mean, how about that, dude? I mean, the guy's all over the place. He's got so much shit going on. It's and you know what the thing is you know, he's like an encyclopedia. He's got it all there. He's rattling off those names
like clockwork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I you know, before I sign off, I just want to remind everybody that we here at the CARC, we really appreciate you guys watching and chatting. And if you dug deep and made a super chat donation, really good on you guys. We really thank you because, you know, the CARC, we can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. It's a brand new show. And we really appreciate it. You know, if you like what you saw tonight, be sure to join our Facebook group. It's the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. And if you guys watched the last couple shows, you know that Sean isn't here tonight. Sean has a break with Mike coming back and stepping up to the microphone. But Sean has a special event he wanted us to let you know about this Thursday, which will be March 11th. Sean will be in Gettysburg. He'll be giving a walking tour around the area, stopping at several of the most well-known historical landmarks there, where he'll discuss the history of the area, and he'll also be probably knowing Sean. He'll probably be talking a few ghost stories. We'll be broadcasting that live on our Facebook group around 1:30 this Thursday afternoon. And again, join our Facebook group. It doesn't cost a goddamn thing. It's the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective. If you've had a sighting or if you want us to investigate anything, you can email us at carcgroup@gmail.com. Again, thanks so much. You know, we got a great couple shows coming up. I'm just going to read them off so you guys can write them down in your calendar. The 23rd, which will be our 1-year anniversary for the group, we've got Steve Streufert, which is this show I'm really looking forward to. He's the owner of Bigfoot Books, and he's got a lot of stuff going on out in California. A great guy. He's got an amazing group with the Coalition for Critical Thinking Facebook group. He's going to be on the show. And then we got Mike's got Phil Poland, right? Phil's coming on April 6th. He's the Para Breakdown guy. And then we've got everybody's favorite fan, everybody's favorite bad guy, MK Davis with the Bluff Creek Massacre. We'll put that to the test on 4/20. And then Bigfoot Times publisher, Dan Perez, is coming on the show. And if you don't know who Dan Perez is, you need to tune in for that show because Dan is the man when it comes to the things you need to know about Bigfoot. Dan is a walking, living, breathing encyclopedia, and he'll be on May 4th. So, Mike, you got anything else to say? We good?
Yeah, all set. Great show. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys coming, tuning in tonight. Be safe and be good, stay safe, and keep on squatching. And you can say goodnight, Bill.
Good night, Bill.
Jackass. Oh, you can. Good night from behind tall trees. If you enjoyed the previous program, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment.